Hey there, my fellow author. I'm Sarah Elizabeth Sawyer, an old soul kind of writer living my dream as a full-time author and authorpreneur. But I didn't start out living a confident, creative lifestyle. I struggled with the fears and the mental and emotional barriers that so often plague writers at all stages of their author career. But the truth is that with the right knowledge, tools, and training, you can overcome those barriers. I'm here to teach you how I've developed a lifestyle that's allowed me to publish 19 books and counting. Each week, as you tune into the Confident Fiction Author podcast, you'll get clarity on the steps you need to take to advance your writing career. Whether it's developing your ideal writing routine, tackling new skills like dictating your fiction, or overcoming the obstacles life throws your way, this podcast will help you live a more confident, creative lifestyle. Let's get started. Hey there, my friend, and welcome to this week's episode of the Confident Fiction Author Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Elizabeth Sawyer, and today I have a throwback episode for you of my 5-minute fiction habit that I did back at the start of 2025. And the reason why I want to bring it back around for you this week is I have just created and launched my 5-minute fiction club over on Substack. I created the 5-minute fiction club to help you take your first steps in dictating your fiction. So it's loaded with some dictation quick start videos. There are fun accountability levels going from walker, hiker, backpacker, all the way up to summit seeker as you build your 5-minute habit by dictating your fiction. And I'm also going to have a monthly live Q&A in there for you to ask all of your burning dictation questions. So that's the 5-minute fiction club. I did start it over on Substack, which is a brand new platform for me, honestly. So if you're on Substack, please do email me a link to your stack so that I can check it out. You can email me at hello@fictioncourses.com. I would love to check it out as I'm learning this platform myself and also welcoming in authors to subscribe to my Substack, which is all about the podcast. So I have the podcast episodes on there. I'm getting the transcripts for each episode loaded onto there. And then for the paid upgrade version of my Substack, that is the 5-minute fiction club. So I wanted to introduce that to you, and I thought a great way to do it would be in bringing out this episode of the 5-minute fiction habit that I developed and really giving you the details and the actions you can take to write fiction every day. So do enjoy this episode and then head over to fictioncourses.substack.com to subscribe to my Substack there. And I invite you to upgrade to the 5-minute fiction club to get those dictation quick start videos, accountability levels, and live Q&A. But first, listen to this episode to learn all about my 5-minute fiction habit. Let's get into it. I'm pulling back the curtain on a daily exercise that I started in the summer of 2024. I had been on a fiction writing sabbatical for several months, and I had technically ended my sabbatical because I did write a novella in the spring of that year, but I really wasn't back into fiction writing. I wasn't feeling confident, honestly, with getting back into fiction writing and doing it as a daily habit. And really, that's something that's been a part of me as an author since I started taking writing seriously as a career and as a lifestyle. I've just always had a hard time being consistent as a fiction writer and getting words down regularly, keeping up with my editing and publishing books. But I will say I have published nearly 20 books so far, so it's not like I'm a slacker. I just haven't been terribly consistent. And I love writing fiction. I love just the act of creating worlds and putting them down on paper, seeing them on the page. And so it's always been something I've wanted to make a more consistent part of my daily life. So while I have published several books, I just love fiction writing and was always trying to figure out how could I get this into my daily routine? And so I will say it has been so amazing to be able to write fiction nearly every day now with this new habit that you can look to incorporating into your daily routine. When I started my 5-minute fiction habit, I knew I needed something that I could go into and be able to write every single day without having any pressure that this was something that would be published someday or that I needed to closely follow an outline. I really went back to the heart of where I started out as a fiction writer, and that is just being a pantster, just writing by the seat of my pants, following the characters through each scene and just seeing what happened. And while having a vague idea of where the story was going in my head, and I may have even already written it all out in my head, and this is just putting it down on paper or on the digital screen. So what I decided with this 5-minute fiction is that I was going to do a throwaway story to build this habit and get me used to having this 5 minutes in my morning routine. And so I don't know about you, this may be a little weird, but I think since I'm talking to fiction writers, it's not going to be as weird as the general audience. But I tell myself stories every night. Like, that's how I go to sleep. I'm in some kind of fictional story world, nothing related typically to what I actually write and publish. It's just purely from my imagination, and I'm telling myself a story. And I know a friend of mine who does this as well, so this may be you. You may be in the habit of telling yourself a story that just continues on night after night, and you're building it and developing it, but you're not planning on doing anything with it. It's not in the genre that you're writing. It's not in anything you're interested in publishing. It's just entertainment for you as you're going to sleep, similar to the tradition of telling someone a story, a bedtime story, when we're kids to go to sleep. So that's something that I do. So I picked one of those as my throwaway story for this 5-minute fiction habit. And so that's the first thing I would recommend is come up with a story idea. It can be something fresh, some kind of plot that you were inspired with after a news story that you saw or something that happened at the coffee shop, and your imagination started taking off with it, and you're like, that has nothing to do with what I'm writing or the genre that I'm in. So pick that. Pick something that is just a complete throwaway story. You have no intention at any point of anyone ever reading it. And that's the place I encourage you to start at with developing this new habit of 5-minute fiction in your day. And I say in your day. I do this as a part of my morning routine. So before I ever get to my desk, before I start work, it is just a part of my routine. And so that's the second thing. Once you've decided on your story idea, decide where you're going to put this 5 minutes of fiction. It may be your bedtime, like when you're going to bed, if you handwrite, type, dictate, whatever your method is, if you're able to do that right before bed, that may be where you want to put this 5 minutes of fiction in. So what I do is I have it tacked on to my morning pages routine. So whenever I get up in the morning, I kind of go through a few things in my routine. I do my Bible reading, and then I get into my morning pages. And then immediately after that, I'm kind of primed because I've just written 3 pages, either by handwriting or dictating up to 750 words for my morning pages. So the pump is primed with some words, and I go immediately into my 5 minutes of fiction. So I get my 5 minutes in the mornings. That doesn't have to be where you put it. You could put it in during your lunch break. So if you work a traditional 9-to-5 job and you have that 30 minutes, an hour for your lunch break, and it can be while you're in line. So if you go solo for lunch, typically you can, while you're standing in line, if you have your phone and you type, you can type out that 5 minutes of fiction or dictate it, or while you're waiting for your food. The incredible thing about this habit is that it is 5 minutes. So somewhere in your day, tagging it with a meal or as a part of your morning or evening routine, or that 5 minutes of being in the carpool line, wherever you can have just a little bit of space and hopefully a little quiet, but that's not even required. But if you can just have that little bit of that 5 minutes and tack it on to a habit or a routine that you already have, just think about where you could put that into your day. Just 5 minutes. All right, so you've picked a story idea, you've picked a time of day or a habit that you already have existing that you're going to tag on your 5 minutes of fiction to. When that time comes, I want you to, one, either watch the clock. So whenever I'm dictating, I don't like literally every second watch the clock, but I do have it on my phone and I'm glancing at it periodically. And usually the closer it gets to that 5 minutes, the more that I'm not watching the clock because I'm really getting into the story. But I do remind myself, oh, I need to check the time. And that will usually pop into my head right at about 5 or 6 minutes. And I'll check it and go, oh, okay, well, I'm done. If I'm dragging a little bit on the story, my creativity is kind of lagging, I may be watching that clock a little bit more, but that's the beauty of this is you are just doing 5 minutes. So if you are feeling blocked, if you are just not having inspiration or much creativity that day, and you're just kind of eking out one word at a time, one little sentence at a time, you can watch the clock and know it's just for 5 minutes. Then you're done for that day. You can check it off your habit tracker. What I like to do at the beginning of the week or when I'm doing my planning, typically the Friday before the next week, is I will put on there, write fiction or write DB11, which is Doc Beck Book 11. That's the one that I'm in right now. But I will just put that on each day of my calendar, of my planner. And then when I get to my desk, I get to scratch that off. So that's a little extra bonus thing is put it in your habit tracker somewhere so that as you're watching the clock, you can remind yourself, you get a sticker at the end and you get to stick that on your calendar or you get to cross that off your list and you already have something done the very first thing when you get to your desk. Or if it's in the evening before you go to bed, you get to tick that box on your habit tracker that you did your 5 minutes of fiction. So watch the clock. If that's too distracting, set the timer on your phone. And that's something I've done as well for habits. Like I like to read for 15 or 20 minutes in the morning. And so I'll set my timer because I could read all day otherwise, but it just gives me that time frame that I can do it without worrying about it's taking up time that I should be spending on something else. I know I have my timer set or I'm watching the clock, and once that time has expired, I'm going to the next thing. So you can set the timer on your phone, just set it for 5 minutes, or you can check the clock. So if it says 6:47 a.m., I know at 6:52 a.m., I am stopping my 5 minutes of fiction. And so the next thing is I want to just talk about how you're going to write this 5 minutes of fiction. You may typically write fiction at your desk on your laptop. You pull up your Microsoft Word or Google Docs or Scrivener. That's the program that I use. And so you pull that up and you sit down for 30 minutes or an hour or 3 hours, whatever it is. And that's typically how you write your fiction. With 5 minutes of fiction, you can give yourself permission to do it in a different way. So if you're like me, you probably started out with handwriting your stories. I know that was the case for me back in the day, long before we had a personal computer in our home or even a typewriter. So I started out whenever I was 5 and my mama gave me a pad of sticky notes, the little yellow pads, and I wrote out my first story on that. So handwriting may have been how you started out with writing fiction. And for this 5 minutes of fiction, even if you now type your stories, you may want to give yourself permission to handwrite this 5 minutes. I mostly handwrite my morning pages, and if I wanted, I could have another notebook and keep it with my morning pages notebook. I already have the pen, already have a hard surface that I'm writing on, and that's something I think I would enjoy experimenting with at some point, is just handwriting some fiction to take me back to those roots of where I started as a writer. On the other hand, I am really attached to dictation. It is just so fast and it's so fun to see the words rack up on my Scrivener iOS app as I'm sitting there. I've finished my morning pages and I pull that up. I pull up the throwaway story that I'm writing in and hit my dictation function and just start speaking my words. And because it's a throwaway story, I actually typically get more words in than when it's one of my regular projects or publishable projects that I'm working in. So that's really fun, and it's really fun to just enjoy the process of writing fiction. I don't do cleanup on that because, again, it's a throwaway story. I'm not even planning myself to go back and read it at any point. Because honestly, it would be a pretty painful experience because I'm not doing cleanup and I've got so many plot holes and I'm changing character names and I'm just sort of floating through this story. So it's a pretty big mess, and I don't think I would enjoy reading back through it with the knowledge that I'm not going to be digging in and editing it and making this actually readable. So make that decision. Are you going to handwrite, type, or dictate your 5 minutes of fiction? And feel free to break away from how you typically write fiction. So if you are someone who types on their computer, feel free to, like I said, if you're in the carpool line, pull out your phone and type it with your thumbs on your phone. There's nothing wrong with that. You're not going to get the speed that you would if you were at your keyboard, but that's okay. This isn't about the amount of words that you're getting. This is about the fact that you are writing fiction for 5 minutes every day. Now, I say every day. I do this Monday through Friday. I typically take Saturday off, and I most certainly take Sunday off. But I do find myself wanting to write on a Saturday morning sometimes, and so I'll go ahead and do my 5 minutes of fiction, especially if I did happen to miss one of my days during the week, and I just want to have that satisfaction of getting in a good 5 days of that 5 minutes of fiction. So you get to decide where this 5-minute fiction habit is going to fit into your life. It may be just on the weekends. You're just doing this 5 minutes of fiction as a reward to yourself on Friday and Saturday and Sunday morning. Whatever that is, whatever it looks like for you, you get to decide where this new habit is going to go in your life each week. So mix it up, shake it up, use your phone, use your computer, dictate, type, handwrite, and just find what works for you in that designated slot of time that you have for your 5 minutes of fiction. The last step here is stick with the 5-minute cutoff. This was something that I determined whenever I started this habit that I would stick with that 5-minute cutoff. And the reason why is I needed to build trust and confidence in myself that I would do this every day and that it would not disrupt the rest of my day and my routine. So what I mean by that is if I let myself get carried away with the story because I genuinely enjoy writing fiction, as challenging as it is sometimes, like it energizes me and I love to write fiction. But if I let myself get carried away in a morning and I go for 30 minutes or an hour that I hadn't planned on doing, then that could cause some resistance the next day and just resistance around my habit overall, because my brain is now saying, we got to our desk 30 minutes or an hour late and that caused this issue. And I forgot I had that early morning appointment, or I wasn't able to get all of my emails cleared off like I would have had I not taken that extra time with it. And so it becomes a threat to the rest of my day and my routine. And so my brain can actually start building resistance of, do we dare open up the Scrivener app and start dictating some fiction, because it could end up taking over some other important task or commitments that I already had lined out for the day. The other thing is, if you stick with that 5-minute cutoff, even if you're in the middle of a scene or a sentence, it makes it really easy to pull it up the next day, because once you remember where you were at in the scene and you're like, oh yeah, I get to continue that action scene that I was writing and the characters were in peril and I had to stop because my 5 minutes were up, but now I get to write that. And so you have that extra sense of excitement going into your next writing session. I will say, after doing my 5 minutes of fiction for several months, that 5 minutes does go by really fast and I want more. The great thing is I set the habit. I get to decide, do I want to make 5 minutes of fiction, 10 minutes of fiction, 15 minutes of fiction, 30 minutes of fiction? Like, I can work that into my routine intentionally. So there's nothing wrong with writing for longer as long as it's intentional. And you know that it's okay for you to take up more of your morning or your afternoon and write more fiction. Or if it's just that's your structured habit, is you go from that 5 minutes and you do expand it, and that becomes your regular fiction writing and eventually takes over your fiction writing for what you're publishing, which is where this has led me to with my 5 minutes of fiction. I did move away from my throwaway story once I had my next book outlined, my Doc Beck book 11. And I started doing that with my 5 minutes of fiction. And that 5 minutes now includes reviewing my outline for where I'm at in the scene. And I do go a bit slower because I know this is something that I'm actually publishing. So I'm taking a bit more care in the plot and the characters and not just going off the rails. I'm not trying to write perfect in any way whatsoever. It's still as messy as my first drafts always are, but I am taking a bit more care in how I'm crafting the story to make sure I stay on track with it. And that's where I say I am looking to expand that 5 minutes into 10 minutes, 15 minutes, up to 20 or more minutes with my fiction writing each day so that I can write and get this novella written. So that 5 minutes does go by really fast now that I've developed the habit of writing 5 minutes of fiction every weekday. So what do you think about this 5-minute fiction habit? Is it something that you'll look to incorporate in the new year as a new habit? I would love to hear about it. Feel free to send me an email at hello@fictioncourses.com and tell me how you're incorporating this. Will it be in the morning, afternoon, or the evening? I can just tell you from experience that this can be a huge boost to your fiction writing in 2025 to help you be more consistent and just enjoy the process of fiction writing. And like I said, with taking that fiction writing sabbatical for several months, it took me a while to get back into fiction writing and into loving the process of creating a story because I was so rusty. And since I write historical fiction as my primary genre, historical fiction and historical westerns, I spend a lot of time in research. I'm doing lots of revising because I do write really messy first drafts. And so if I wrote 30 minutes or an hour of fiction every single day, I couldn't keep pace with myself with the research and the editing. So that's another reason why I've just been such an inconsistent fiction writer as far as putting words down on the page and using that as the definition. I'm not writing every day because I would be generating too much content for me to keep up with the research and the revising process. But with 5 minutes of fiction, it gives me that opportunity to either write in a throwaway story, or if it is a season that I'm writing a new draft, I'm already primed and I'm not having to scrub off the rust of my writing wheels and get things going again. So I get to enjoy writing fiction each day without it being a huge commitment and without generating more fiction than I can keep up with on the outlining, research, and revising process. All right, bringing it all home for you. The main thing with 5-minute fiction is I want you to make it ridiculously easy. I know we all have busy lives, and as we're looking ahead to 2025 and all the things that we want to get done and the new habits we want to create and establish in our lives, it can feel a bit much. But 5 minutes of fiction has just made it ridiculously easy for me to establish that habit and make it so doable to keep up with each and every day. And I hope it does for you. I hope it brings back just some joy into your fiction writing each day. If you have been in a dry season or on sabbatical like I have, and you're looking for a re-entry point that you can get writing into your life consistently again, I hope 5-minute fiction is helpful for you. All right, my friend, that is all for this week's episode of the Confident Fiction Author Podcast. I'm excited to have you join me in developing your 5-minute fiction habit through the 5-Minute Fiction Club that I created over on my Substack. You can get subscribed to that over at fictioncourses.substack.com. I'll see you in there. And I'll also see you in next week's podcast episode. Take care.